As a foster care adoption consultant, I cannot tell you how frequently I hear families come to me and say, I only want to adopt a child 5 or under. I do not know why, but 5 seems to be this magic, elusive number that they're like, I cannot possibly go above the age of 5. And to be fair, I get it. When my husband and I first approached the idea of adopting from foster care, we were those people. However, as we went throughout the process, we really started to change our minds and open up that age range. And I'm so glad we did. So if you're someone who's kind of considered adopting and you've had that magic 0 to 5 age range in your head, today I want to talk about the possibility of expanding that into school-age children. And so the range of children I am going to be discussing today is more from that age of like kindergarten, maybe through 5th or 6th grade. So keep watching to see if this could be the right fit for you. Hey there, if you're new here, my name is Katie, and if you're not, welcome back. I am a foster care adoption consultant, and I work with families virtually all over the country to help them adopt from foster care. Whether you have burning questions about the process or you just don't know what the right path is for you, that is why I am here. And in fact, I have a free quiz that I will link in the description box below, which will let you know if you are truly ready to adopt. So definitely check that out because I think it's a super helpful quiz, give you kind of a baseline to understand where you're at if you're thinking about adoption. Are you really ready to begin the process, or do you need to slow down a little bit first and do some more research? So let's go ahead and talk about the benefits and the challenges of adopting school-aged kids. I'm going to start with the challenges because you know me, I like to end on a positive note after I scare you a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into the challenges first. So obviously I think one major challenge of adopting slightly older children is that there's more of their history that you just don't really know about. You have to learn. You have to learn about their childhood, how they were raised. There's a lot more guesswork that goes into it because they won't have been with you for quite as long. So obviously that can be a little intimidating. It can be a little scary. So I'd put that as our first challenge because that is one I hear a lot. And along with that, this child very possibly has been raised by multiple sets of parents and has been raised maybe differently than you would raise them. And so they might be a little more set in their ways in terms of like manners and how they go about things, chores, all of those things. There might be a little bit of growing pains as they adjust to your way of parenting. So that can be a little bit difficult if you have this set expectations of kind of like, hey, these are the manners I expect, this is the schedule I expect to follow. And then your kids come to you and they're like, well, we didn't do that before. And so obviously that can be difficult. And I know that this was a huge fear for us going into it and this sounds so funny, but I had never been a parent before. We adopted as our first choice, plan A. It's what we wanted to do. And so the idea of adopting an older kid was really intimidating to me because I had never parented before. And actually, a lot of the people that I work with in my consultation business, they also have never parented before. And so I understand that fear of being like, I've never even been a parent, and I'm just going to be thrown into the deep end with like an 8-year-old? No, thank you. You know, it can sound really scary. And I remember specifically saying to our caseworker, I said, well, you know, if I'm not that good of a parent, if I end up not being super good at parenting, I don't want them to know that yet. Like a little kid, you kind of have some years early on to get things together and figure out how to do everything before they have solid memories of you not doing the best job. That sounds really bad, but I think you know what I mean. Like it's going to be growing pains. You're going to have to adjust and learn things along the way. And it'd be a little bit easier if you don't have like this child who's telling you, well, my other parents did this and they were better than you and you clearly don't know what you're doing. Those were definitely fears that I had. If I was doing a bad job, I didn't want the kid to be so aware that I was doing a bad job until I could figure it out and fix it. And I definitely hear that a lot. People are worried about, you know, the fact that they've had multiple parents and they're comparing them, and I get it. And obviously with school-age children, there comes school. And so another challenge that you could face with school-age children is that it's very common that kids adopted from foster care will have academic concerns and struggles, and you may find that you have to learn how to advocate for your child at school, whether that's to get them special education services in some way, or for their teacher to simply understand their situation, or if there's bullying. There's just a whole other layer of things when school gets involved. Another reason why people kind of mention that they would rather adopt a younger child, younger than 5, is because of that bonding time they could get with the child. Because if there's a stay-at-home parent, obviously if the child is not going to school, you get a lot more time with them, and I totally see that, and I think that's a really valid reason to want to adopt a younger child. But I also think we have to realize that there are plenty of people who want to adopt younger kids. Pretty much everyone seems to at first. There are a few unicorns. There are a few people who are like, I just know I'm called to adopt teens, or I just know that I want to adopt older kids. I like older kids better. I work with them better. But a lot of times you'll find most people will only want to adopt a kid 5 or younger. And so there's not a huge need for people to adopt those ages. So those are some of the challenges that come along with adopting older kids. But I also think there are a lot of great benefits to adopting older kids. And obviously the number one is that it's a huge need. There is a huge need for families who are willing to adopt older children. When we adopted our older 2 kids, I was shocked to find out that we were the only family who was in the running to adopt them. And you have to understand that with our first adoption, even though we opened up our age range to 10 and all this stuff, we still were placed with a 1.5-year-old, which I want to clarify is pretty rare. I don't want to give the impression that that's super easy or that's super common, but it happened. For some reason it happened. And I think there were like 12 to 15 other families who were interested in adopting her and were in the running alongside us. So we went from that level of quote unquote competition to no competition. And you have to understand that, yeah, our 1.5-year-old was healthy, she was sweet, she was fun, she was smart. There weren't any major concerns with her. So obviously she's young, she's healthy. There are going to be more families who feel they can handle that. But our older kids, despite the fact they had been in foster care for a while, they had been in the same foster home for the previous 3 years. And it had been a really secure and stable environment for them. And overall, they were doing well. There were still issues. There were anger, anxiety issues. There were school issues. There were little things like that. But even their caseworkers told us like they're the easiest case they had from all the people on their caseload. And so I remember asking the caseworker, like, how is it that we are the only family interested in adopting them? And they specifically said, it's because the oldest is almost 10. And people are really afraid of that. They're afraid of the idea of adopting an older kid. And so no one's interested. They said if it had just been the 5-year-old, our son, on his own, there would have been a huge line of people who wanted to adopt him, and it would have been an easy case to find someone for. And so that just broke my heart because I'm like, these kids are good kids. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'll complain about my kids sometimes and their behaviors and all that, but I understand deep down that these are some good kids. They have their issues, but they're overcoming them well. There were no like major red flag behaviors or anything like that. So really the only reason no one was interested was because of the age. And I just think that's so sad. And I think that there's a huge myth that adopting an older kid will be harder, will for sure be harder than adopting a younger kid in terms of behaviors you may deal with or issues that may come up. But I will tell you, and I love my youngest to death, but we have had more struggles with our youngest than we have with our older kids. Don't get me wrong, there's struggles with everyone, but I think that it has been more challenging for us with our youngest. And I like to bring that up because I just don't think people talk about that. People always say, oh, if they're younger, it's easy. But there's so many reasons why adopting older kids can also be really great. One thing I view as a pro that many people may think is a con is a lot of people go into it also thinking, oh, these kids I won't be able to experience any firsts with them. They'll have already done everything and it just won't be as special, especially if you're a first-time parent. And I will say that could not be further from the truth. So many kids in foster care are lacking normal experiences that most kids have already done. So when we had our kids move in with us, they were 5 and 10, our older 2. And I found out throughout the next couple of years that they had never been sledding, they had never been trick-or-treating, they had never been swimming in a swimming pool. One of them had never even been to a splash pad. I mean, the list goes on and on. Never been to an amusement park or anything like that. Never traveled outside of maybe 20 minutes from their house. Yeah, there were so many firsts we experienced with them, and there was something even more special about experience that first with them when it was so much more delayed than you would think it should be. So like taking my kids sledding for the first time when they were 6 and 10 was like, I couldn't believe, like we packed up to go sledding and they were like, I'm so excited to try this. And I said, wait, you've never been sledding? And they were like, no, we've never done it. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so special. I think I actually have a vlog of that. So if I can, I'll link that, up in the corner or down below. It was just so special. I just had no clue they had never done it before. And there were countless things like that we got to experience. Having them fly in an airplane for the first time, and it's really cool to experience those with any kid, but I think especially when it's with a kid that you would think has already gone trick-or-treating before in their lives or has already gone sledding, and you get to experience that for the first time with them, it's just a really joyful thing. Another thing that I find as a huge pro of adopting older kids is that they're usually slightly more independent. And so when you have a really young kid that you're adopting, they're going to be clinging to you 24/7 and they need you for everything. And you have to realize though that toddlers need you for everything. And they also don't want your help with anything. So that can be really challenging in general, but when you add attachment issues in there and getting to know each other and getting that trust built, it can be pretty hard. And so one thing I've really appreciated with older kids is that they're more capable of taking care of themselves, taking over some of their self-care tasks, and then you can just help them like in general with it or help if there's an issue. So like one huge benefit for us is that our kids are all old enough that they can get their own breakfast now. So we have like a little breakfast bar where we have cereal and bagels and all these different options. And like on a Saturday morning, I kid you not, we can often sleep in. Not always, but we can sometimes sleep in because they will get up and get their breakfast because they know where it is and how to do it. That is really nice, it's not like that when you have a much younger kid. Obviously, that's kind of a silly practical thing, but it does make a difference. I also think if you are a working parent, if you have two working parents in the home or you're a single parent and you're working, having school-aged kids simplifies a lot in terms of childcare. And I know this is a really practical kind of not so like deep reason. But if you are working full time and your kid's gonna have to go to daycare, that's gonna get expensive. And then they're gonna have those caretakers and then they're gonna go to school and they're gonna have you. It's just a lot. But if they're school aged, they're gonna be in school most of the day with peers and they're gonna have that consistent school environment over the years of their elementary school education, most likely. And so it's just a really practical reason. I think people don't realize how hard it can be with little kids. If they are in daycare and you're working and then you have attachment stuff going on, it just can be a lot. So yeah, there's some practical reasons there as well why it can be a little bit easier. Another reason why I in general enjoy older kids is because they can actually learn to express their emotions in a clear way. So when you have a very little kid like a toddler, a lot of times guess how they express their emotions? Screaming, hitting, biting, all of those things that are not so fun to deal with. And you also can't always explain to them what's going on. I know I did a video a long time ago that's really popular on my channel about toddler adoption because we obviously adopted a toddler. And one of the things I mentioned in that video is how hard it was not being able to explain to our daughter what was happening because all she knew was that we were the wrong people. We were not her foster mom that she had been with for a year or so. We were some random strangers and we took her away and we didn't bring her back. She had a lot of behaviors as a result of that pain and confusion of the situation, which I can't imagine how scary that would be when you can't understand at that age what's happening. And so I remember in those times just being like, I wish I had a way that I could explain it to her, but she's just not at the appropriate age yet to understand and grasp the situation. With older kids, they are at an age where they can understand the situation. And what I love about that is you can teach them how to express their emotions. I know my video last week was all about anger and stuff, and you can teach them steps to work through those emotions, to express them to you. And I think that is really powerful and it can help a lot of healing happen for your kids. And it can also help you not lose your mind because your kid's just acting out and can't actually explain what's going on and you can't talk them through it. So I prefer that part of having older kids is that we can actually talk about emotions. We can use our words instead of screaming and biting. For the most part, sometimes there's some screaming and hitting and stuff between siblings, but we work through it and we get through it. So I think that's a huge benefit of adopting an older kid, when they can understand what's happening and understand, even if they're sad or upset about the process of being adopted or they're grieving something, you can have conversations to help them get through it. And therapy is also more effective with older kids. So if you have older kids who are struggling and just moved to your home, it's a lot easier to get a therapist for kids who are slightly older and for them to actually benefit from that therapy more. Okay, my final pro in this category is that I think a lot of times it's scary. You know, I mentioned in the challenges section, there's a lot of history your child has been through that you have to learn and figure out because you weren't there for it. But at the same time, if you adopt an older child from foster care, there is usually a pretty decent paper trail on that kid because they've been in the system for a while, and so they know a lot about the child's background. And it's not as much guessing of what's going to happen in the future. When we adopted our kids, we got this huge stack. I mean, it was probably like this tall. I don't know if it was bigger than my head, okay? So it was big. And it was all of the information from all of their case plans over all this time, information about biological family, information about school performance, all of this stuff. And so we had a lot more information adopting those kids than we did with our youngest because she was so young. There wasn't a lot to know, and we're still learning things about her as she grows up. And so I think people forget that when a kid is older, you often have a better idea of how they're actually doing because there's a paper trail. So that's another, I feel like a lot of these are really practical, and I hope that doesn't come across the wrong way. Like, oh, adopt an older kid because it's more practical for you. That's not it, but I just know so many people are fearful of adopting older kids, and I just want to express that we don't need to be afraid. There are situations where younger kids can struggle a lot and situations where older kids can do just fine, and vice versa. There's no predictor, and I don't think age is the best meter of how easy or hard an adoption situation will be. And also, eventually your kid is going to be school age. They're not going to stay in that coveted 0 to 5 age forever anyway. They are going to grow up, and so eventually you will be parenting a kid that age anyway. So anyway, I think you can tell I might be slightly biased towards being open to adopting older kids simply because we also started with that 0 to 5 age range, and then we expanded, and I'm glad we did. And so I understand that my experience is not everyone's, but I do think this list of challenges and benefits of adopting older kids should give you an idea of whether or not you could handle it, and maybe, just maybe, you could increase your age range slightly. When I work with clients, I almost always push them to go a year or two older than what they think they're comfortable with, because you don't have to say yes. Let's say that you want to adopt a kid 0 to 5. I would encourage you go to 7, but just know you can say no to potential matches for a 6 or 7-year-old if they're not the right fit. But you might miss out on a really wonderful kid because your age range is not expanded enough to even be able to be considered for them. So that's why I say that. And I don't think adopting older kids is right for everyone. I truly don't. And when I have clients and I talk with them and they give me their reasons for wanting to adopt a younger kid, there are sometimes very valid reasons, and I agree with them that they should stick with that age range. So it's not that it's a one-size-fits-all approach, but it's worth considering. And, in that same way, I don't think that everyone is cut out for adoption or would maybe even like being an adoptive parent. So if you're someone who's still kind of wondering, if you're not sure if adoption is right for you, definitely check out that quiz I mentioned. It's in the description box below. It's a free quiz you can take to see if you are truly ready to adopt. If you found this video helpful in any way, if you could click the like button, that helps other families who are considering adoption find my channel. And subscribe for sure, because I have a couple of really great videos coming up. I'm going to be interviewing an adoptee. I'm going to be interviewing a single foster mom, and I'm super excited to share those with you and get some other perspectives in here on the channel. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.